Hey y'all, it's Sarah. I am bringing you what I think is super cute kind of trio of wall art today. These are going to be, I don't really know if there is like a technical name for it, but I've been seeing these herb-like prints that have like the little plants on them, or like the leaf drawing on them, and then a really nice crisp white matting. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. There's no cutting machine needed. I'm going to be using these Dollar Tree rub-ons. I'm going to be using foam core, of course, and I'm going to tell you what your cuts are. Now, this is for one. I did three, and I'm going to show you all three when I'm done. So if you just want to do one, just do one. If you want to do all three and make it a trio like I did, then you would triple all of these measurements. So the first piece is going to be a 14 by 14. Your next piece is going to be a 7 by 7. And then you're going to want 4 of these 1.5 inch by 14 inch. And this is going to be our frame. And I did mine in a miter cut, but you could very easily do yours butted against one another like this. For this particular print that I wanted to do, I really felt like the miter corners looked a little better for me. So I'm going to show you real quick how to get that mitered edge. If you're not familiar and you haven't watched previously. So this is a really quick way. Super simple. It's the simplest way I know how to show it. There was probably other simple ways too, but this is the simplest way I know how to show you guys. So keep in mind, I did one end already, and I wanted to show with one end done to remind you that when you do these, you always want your longest points on one side and your shorter points on the other side. And I'm going to show you how to do this really quick. So my little piece here is 1.5 inches wide. I want to create a perfect square to follow because half of a perfect square is going to give you a 45-degree angle. And when I mean half on the diagonal. So I want to keep in mind that my longest point is up here, so I want to make sure that I cut up this direction. And I'm just going to come in here from this corner to corner. And I start just above so that I've got good pressure on my cut before I hit that foam core surface. And there you go. Super easy. And now you have like this really nice, clean, mitered frame. So let me put that out of the way. Let's put the sharp objects up. So I want to do a couple things in weird orders, but because we need to paint our frames out, I definitely do not want to risk getting any paint on these white surfaces because we want to keep them as white and crisp as possible. So before I get any paint pulled out, I want to go ahead and do my rub-on part so that I can set this way to the side. I made that mistake already on one of them. I got paint fingerprints on it when I picked it up to do my rub-on. So I'm showing you this order instead. I have already used off of here, you can see, but there was a couple long stem different varieties here. And I'm going to take this one. So I only want that one piece. I'm just going to grab some scissors. And I want to cut just that one out. I'm cutting the whole thing because it makes it easier to not accidentally scrape off your rub-on. So I'm going to bring this over here and I'm going to grab my ruler really quick. And I kind of want to see where my center is. This is a 7-inch block, so it should be somewhere roughly at around 3.5 by 3.5. And I'm going to guess that it's right about here. I was pretty close. So when I line this up, that just gives me where I know I'm getting it kind of centered. And I'm going to make sure that my rub-on covers my little dot. Now this is the part where, this is how it comes off. It's a little different than a sticker. Us old school scrapbookers, we are very familiar with the idea of rub-ons. So I just lined up my really skinny stem right on my little dot. Now this, you certainly could print something out. I would not want a Mod Podge on here, just to not risk bubbling this up. But you could print something out and hand cut it or fussy cut it. You want to take your time on doing this, because once you peel that up, you want to make sure that you're getting a nice clean image. And I recommend a popsicle stick, although this one is very blunt. I'm going to show you what I used, but you want to be very, very cautious in using any kind of little metal, anything. I just used this because I was able to guide it directly on those leaves and stems. You don't want to use a whole lot on this, because you guys have seen we use these same kind of tools to damage this surface. So I'm not pushing very hard at all. I'm only hitting right on that actual image, because if you especially using this kind of tool, if you rub on too much of that surface, you will see that indentation when you go to pull this off. I know the popsicle stick for this is honestly the better option. However, I had a lot more control with this little tool. And you can start to see a color change when your application is really good. You'll start to see like the kind of texture of that changes as it's releasing to that from that plastic backer. You can see all of a sudden it'll get lighter. And that means it's getting its adhesion to your bottom piece now. And you can see going this route, it allowed me to really hit those individually without doing a lot of denting around this. Because this little spot is definitely going to be our focus area of this little piece of art. You don't want to leave a whole bunch of dents behind. So as I pull this up, I'm going to keep my little tool handy to make sure that I press down any parts that may lift or crack on me as I'm lifting this up. Very similar to wanting to take your time and lifting when you're taking your transfer tape off of vinyl. It's just with these, you really want to take your time. That little rub-on transfer underneath is thinner than even vinyl. Let's see, it looks like I'm doing pretty good here. Oh, and that's such a crisp, beautiful image. I don't know if you can tell really how nicely that has, it's almost like a watercolor on there. And so very simple, it's a very simple image. I wanted to keep it very simple, and when you see the end results, you'll see why that simplicity really kind of worked for me with this. So now that that one's done, I'm going to put it to the side. Like I said, we want to keep these really crisp and white. We want to keep this piece really crisp and white. I do not want it on my surface when the paints get open. I do want to show you, I'm going to go in and erase just where I had pencil marks and marked my spot. Guys, I will always recommend using a white eraser on this. Sometimes the color erasers will leave color-like smudges. Also, while you're playing with this, if you get fingerprints and things like that, smudges and marks, now you can see I've been using mine quite a while and I've cut it down, but this is like the eraser, the rubber type eraser that Dollar Tree carries. These work really well. I've been using these for years as a scrapbooker. And you can see where there's like maybe a little fingerprint smudge that I had that just got right off. And it does not, sometimes when you erase and it starts to erase into the paper, this doesn't really have that issue, and it works really good to get adhesives off. So that's just a quick tip. I am going to paint these. You guys know that my paint tutorials are kind of an independent little entity of their own. So I won't give a lot of detail on the paint finish that I'm using. I'm just going to jump in and do it. Just know that this one is the Salvage Barnwood paint. It's the one that I use the most because it's what I'm decorating in my house with. And the only thing that I'm really going to do to these particular frames, because this is almost going to be a minimalist looking kind of piece, all I'm doing is taking my little tip of my pencil. There's no, the lead's not pulled up or anything, but I'm going on each of these 45-degree cuts, and I'm doing right beside them. And when it's all said and done, these are going to look like my nail holes that this thing was actually physically nailed together. And all we're going to be using is some hot glue. Okay, so that's really all I wanted to do on this part. I did not want to distress it too hard. I want these to have a fairly clean look for a mix of a rustic minimalist craft. So I'm going to come in first with, I've got Waverly Wax in the color Antique. I have got Waverly Wax in the color Clear. And I also have Waverly Wax in, or I'm sorry, Waverly Chalk Paint in the color Ink, which is black. And I'll be mixing all of these. Check out the Salvage Barnwood videos for this. This will be kind of a light to mid shade. I'm not going super dark with it. I do want a little more of the brown hue in it than you typically see me do. A lot of times you see mine has this, I go slightly heavier with the gray. This time I'm going to go slightly more with the brown. And it's because I felt like the brown really worked with the greenery on the faux print that we just made. And I know I'm using my good sponge for this. My other one, I did not put it in the Ziploc bag like I was supposed to. And it's a little hardened. I need to cut me a new piece of it. Okay, so my edges are done on all of that. My bottoms kind of have the white covered. I definitely want to do that. It's leaked through enough to kind of do that for me. And just to make this easy for me, I'm going to line these up where those points are point to point. I'm going to come in here, really get my brown going. Not too worried about getting in these quote-unquote nail holes here right now, because I want to do that with my black. But I do want to get some pretty good coverage with this antique color. And the less of this brown that I would put down, the more of the gray overtones that are going to show. This time, I want just as much brown showing. And I'm not worried too much about putting any designs in this at this stage, because I'm going to go back over it with the black, and it's going to smooth my graining that way. So I'm going to grab my little fan and kind of help speed this process up some. And it's hard for me to tell now if they're tacky or not. This whole glove thing is very difficult for me. I am certainly a feel my way through my projects. So I've added a little more of the brown. And you can see how that goes on in layers. So you could feasibly make your colors as dark as you wanted to. You just give a little dry time in between, and you can layer that color back over it again, and it'll collectively add those layers in. Okay, now I'm gonna come in and switch with my black, and I'm gonna need my clear wax, and you'll see why. Wrong sponge. So my black sponge is saturated really well. And I want to tap this. I want to make sure you guys can see how this mixture is kind of working out for me. So I want to grab a plate here where you can really see this. So you can see my sponge was saturated already. It stays that way. It has a little bit of color to it, but not much. And I'm barely going to add any of this black in. We don't need much of it. That's why I'm using chalk paint, so that we don't have to use all that much. And you can see it's already gone into a dark consistency, and my sponge is really heavily loaded. So with it being really heavily loaded like that, and not just with the black paint, I'm not going to leave as much of a mess behind as far as color pigment when I go and push that paint material down in these little nail holes. If that makes sense. It doesn't, a lot of times as you play with this, you'll see that if you tap just more of the plain paint pigment in, it does not blend out, and then you have like this ring of color. So with that wax, it allows you to blend some of that out. Now I want to show something when I talk about pulling back color, and that's part of why I like this sponge. So the grain on that is pretty heavy. I want to pull some of that back. I want to soften it a little. I want to soften those colors. I want to soften that grain. And this sponge is really nice for that. It's not saturated. It's got a dense texture to it. So it kind of smooths down a little of that heaviness on that grain. Whoops. I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to take that really saturated wet sponge and just push that paint down, that wax paint mix down in there. And that wax is helping keep me from discoloring that whole section. It's letting it float on that surface for a minute. And I was having a hard time with fingerprints before, just with my fingers. Now it's glove prints, so, although it does leave an interesting texture. And I'm just going to do the same thing here. I'm going to kind of soften those black grains a little bit so that the brown is still showing through. And I'm going to slide these to the side. Whoops, see, that's what I'm talking about. The gloves definitely leave their own kind of fingerprints. So this step right here is very important. Clean your surface up really, really well before you get ready to do this next part. Absolutely, please save yourself the sadness that I have already experienced because that white just hit only a tiny little bit. And I keep a water spray bottle really close by so that I can just clean mine off really easily. But I'm telling you, on this particular one, clean your surface off well. I was so upset with myself getting paint on my white surface and having to start completely over. I don't want y'all to go through that same disappointment. I was pretty disappointed. Although that gave me a little extra opportunity to practice on this one. Okay, so most of that's dry. Make sure that there's... Okay. That's all the paint. We're good. Okay, so this part is going to be the super simplest part. And I'm going to show you, and you're going to be like, wow, that was embarrassingly easy. So I'm just going to kind of line this up here. Make sure I get it fairly close. Scooch that over just a bit. There's no perfect measurement on this, but I'm going to get it eyeballed pretty close. So that looks like it's pretty close to me. That's about where I'm going to glue it. I just kind of marked that a little bit with my fingernail. So I'm just going to come in and glue edge to edge. You want a really good seal, but try to make sure that you don't push any glue out from under it. And so here is where my little fingernail mark was. So now we have this white on white matte layered look with a little dimension there. Really simple. That is so simple to do. The hardest part was measuring these pieces and cutting them. Now I'm going to come in with my frame, and hopefully it's dry enough and I will not do what I did previously. Oh no, there's still paint. So I'm just going to grab a little napkin here that I can keep wiping my fingers on to make sure that I do not cause myself any heartache here. And I'm still going to glue these down even though they're not completely dry. As long as I'm not moving them around, I should be okay. I just know now to take extra precaution. So what I'm going to do is just put my frame in place. And I'm bumping it straight against that edge. When I am done with this, I'm going to do like I do with all my pieces. Go in with some paint. Paint out my edges. I will tell you, in some of them where I have not been able to paint the edge good, I have cheated and gone in with the Dollar Tree spackling and spackled the sides where I didn't line it up good or whatever. And I didn't have good cuts and I wanted to hide that. I have spackled in on that so that I could paint over it and not have it look bad. Mostly to correct my own errors. But you can certainly try that if you want a cleaner edge. I've had to, just on a couple pieces that I did not, when I laid everything out and I cut the excess off, I didn't cut it really straight since it was already glued together. So that's a really quick cheat to kind of fix that if you make that mistake. Or it's a nice way to do it overall if you just want it to go in and finish all your sides that way. So all I've done is slide each one of these little pieces of frame in place. Now, for me personally, my next step would be to make sure that this piece is finished out. That means finishing my sides, doing my back, all of that. You guys can see that to me is just, I don't know, I've seen these all over Pinterest. These kind of vintage herb looking prints. I really love them. I kind of like their understated simplicity. You know, they just, I don't know, they very much appeal to me. So I wanted a set of my own. And I'm going to try to fit the whole set. And each one of these is slightly different. I use the bottoms. The bottom row on that rub-on. And I'll show you real quick what I mean about finishing out my edges. I usually finish out my edges. And my backside is finished also. So I've painted probably the first 1.5 inches in. And then I covered it with brown craft paper, cut to size. So it is a very finished piece. And I'll do the same with this other one. But I really am looking forward to kind of hanging these in a row. And I want to tell you the really cool thing about that is that this particular set, the way that they're made, these are going to be lightweight enough to hold up with poster tack. And if you don't know what that is, I'm going to show you a couple different varieties really quick. This is the Loctite brand. And this, you just roll it up in a ball. You stick it in your corners. Dollar Tree has a version. I have several different versions in my little stash of this wall putty stuff. You just roll it in a ball. Stick it on something like this. You might want to go ahead and do all four corners. Pop it up on your wall. And you are good to go. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I do. I think this is a really great look for what it is. The absolute simplicity of it. And you're barely using, this was not even 2 full sheets of foam core, I believe, all together, and then a package of the rub-ons. And you're going to get multiple uses out of these rub-ons, because you can see that I still have several more that I can cut out. I wasted a couple of them getting fingerprints on the white to begin with, but I don't know, this is maybe a $2 craft, and I really love the look of this. These are 14 inches wide, so they are not tiny. I know the camera distorts that a little bit. These are a good size, and by the time you line them up, whether long way or sideways, you're getting a really nice size art piece altogether. So for the simplicity, the ease of it, and I really love how they turned out. I love that white on white. It's really such a minimalistic look to me to bring into the over-the-top farmhouse look. I just really like it. I hope you guys do too. I think these are absolutely just too cute, and I cannot wait to get them hung up. I've been eyeballing these for such a long time, or something similar. Usually I see them in like a black frame or a gold glass frame. But I wanted a version that really worked with my decor. So I hope this gives you some ideas on maybe not even this direction, but something along that line. By the way, I will tell you, I had a very tough time making a decision, because I tried it with using the back mat with black foam core, and then this white frame, and then the wood frame. And I have to tell you, that looks really good too, with the black matting around it and the white dimensional section. So keep that in mind if that works with your decor. I struggled whether or not to make that decision. I went ahead and went with the white, but just know that that one is a really nice looking option too. If you like this look, that one is a really good version of this look. And I am looking forward to getting a bunch of other crafts done today. It is the weekend. It is a lazy day for me, so you guys will be probably seeing several more pop up for me today. I will talk to you guys soon. Have a great weekend, and hopefully get some crafting done.